Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, Blended Podcasts, and Pledge. And I'm so excited to be collaborating once again with the team at Werner. Now, they've been featured on Let's Talk Supply Chain a number of times talking about what they do. So cross-border, dedicated freight, competitive advantage, and sustainability. And they've shared so many valuable insights with me already. So go and check out episodes 446, 460, 477, and 483, wherever you listen to the Let's Talk Supply Chain podcast, if you haven't already. So today we're taking on a brand new topic, and that's cargo theft. Now, it's a huge problem. Numerous experts who spoke to CNBC as part of a recent investigation said that the industry was under attack as they estimated losses close to $1 billion or more per year. And it's not just groups hitting trucks on the road. We're also seeing high levels of fraud as criminals leverage increasingly sophisticated technologies. So, what can businesses do to protect themselves from costly attacks? Well, we're going to be diving into that today. Now, I'm joined by Jordan Strawn, and we're going to be exploring exactly why cargo theft is reaching record highs and how fraud tactics are evolving. We're going to be diving into the AI-powered tools and advanced technologies that businesses can leverage to tackle the problem, and how stakeholders are working together to prevent theft, recover stolen freight faster, and we'll be sharing how to build a scalable, technology-enabled cargo security strategy tailored to your network and your risk profile. Now, remember, if you have any questions throughout the conversations, please add them to the comments, and we will get to those a little bit later. Plus, if you are loving the conversation, we want to see those fire emojis, so make sure to put those in the comment section as well. So welcome to the show, Jordan.
Hey, Sarah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. Now, before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself? And for anyone that might not know, give us a bit of an overview of Werner as well.
Sure, I'm Jordan Strawn and Senior Vice President of Logistics, overseeing our truckload brokerage and our PowerLink divisions. A little about Werner. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you spoke to our cross-border division. We're a large logistics company, and we're here in North America. So you mentioned the cross-border, Mexico, U.S., Canada. We have a strong dedicated fleet, one-way network, as well as logistics arm, which is where I reside and have responsibility over the brokerage and our PowerLink division. We also have intermodal, final mile. We've got over 9,000 pieces of equipment on the power side, over 30,000 trailers. So a pretty large network, a little unique in the space in that we have a decent sized brokerage as well as a pretty good sized trucking organization, all coupled together as mentioned earlier with the cross-border components.
Awesome. And I think you love football.
I do. Yeah, football kicks off this week. It's week one for college football. There's a little uniqueness about that. So Tulane, University of South Florida, and Florida Atlantic, who you see the helmets behind me, all three of those schools we support on the dedicated side, actually.
Awesome.
Moving their equipment to away games for USF, who plays off campus, to their home games as well. Go Bulls! We got a game tonight, so.
That is awesome. I love that. I'm sorry. I had to ask about it because I know I'm not the only one sitting here wondering about all of the football and whether you like it or not. I mean, it's kind of obvious. And for anybody watching, we want to know where you're watching from. So make sure to put that in the comments, and we'll make sure to put that up on the screen. Now, let's start talking about the landscape of cargo theft right now. Why do you think that cargo theft is on the rise?
Well, I think there's some economics behind it. When we think about how much goods cost these days and the rise of the cost, and so I think people are willing to purchase, if you will, secondhand goods that might not have come from their traditional places where they go and buy things. So there's a market, even in the U.S., and then for sure, definitely outside of the U.S. And so I think that that market is driving folks to, like, there's a need for it, I guess, if you will. I say need, that there's somebody out there that's willing to buy it. So I think that's one component of it. And then, I also think that there's a really a high increase in thieves that are have noticed some vulnerability within the supply chain and the space. And there's an evolution of technology in an area that frankly has lacked in technology. And when there's a lacking of technology through that evolution, there's a lot of gaps as people integrate that technology. And I think they've identified that and are right now striking.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the rise of what products are starting to cost. Now, we gave a couple of shout outs on screen. I want to give a shout out to Amber and Mike. Thanks for joining us today as well. Keep them coming, keep those fire emojis coming. All right. So, what types of products do you think that thieves are targeting out on the road? We just talked about how the increase of price of product is making the fact that cargo theft is on the rise. Is there a particular product? I mean, electronics, I would assume because they are high value, but everything with the rise of costs is kind of a little bit more higher value now anyways. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I've been in the industry now 18 years, and it definitely started with the technology piece and the high value aspect. That was what was most vulnerable. Um, I think now, of course, that's a component for sure, and we still see that. But there's also what can they move quickly. So when these thieves take possession of it, what can I move at a fast pace
Mhm.
and turn it into cash as quick as possible, whether they do it stateside or they do it internationally. And so, there's it's odd. It's clothing.
Really?
It's energy drinks for sure. It's things. It's shoes. It's sneakers. It's things that they can get rid of quickly, and people are willing to buy. And like I said, there's a secondhand market almost everywhere now for them to go purchase those goods that way.
Well, and the energy drinks would have an expiry date. So yeah, they would have to get those.
They
Any sort of
would, but
food
they're
type
not
product.
traceable. So if you think about what's traceable and what's not traceable, technology is very traceable these days. So it's hard to get rid of it. But an energy drink, nobody questions where it comes from when they
That's
purchase it.
fair.
There's an expiration date, sure, but you don't question how they get it. You
That's
just
fair.
consume it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's such a good point. But I don't think that it's just physical theft that is increasing. Can you talk to us a little bit about the rise of fraud and what some of those common tactics might look like as well? Because I've been hearing a lot about that. I think, I don't think it's called lost loads, but like it's like almost like ghost loads or something like that. Talk to us about the rise of the fraud, though.
Sure. So when we think about, as you said, like the straight theft is what we used to see, where almost a smash and grab style, we're going to come and take the product, whether they open the trailers or they steal the whole truck. It's very sophisticated now. They're leveraging technology on the fraud side. They're taking advantage of the broker network, and that's the space that I live in. But they're taking advantage of it in a way that we haven't seen before in the past. There was the old double broker move that we most will talk
Yes,
about and say
that
that's
was
the
it.
problem, right? A double broker, right? So
Yep.
you're not really sure who has the load, who moved it, but in most cases, double brokering, the load would still deliver. There was just a hostage component where they wanted to get paid for that load. Now they've identified that they can go in and they can act as a true motor carrier, whether they spoof an email, they spoof a phone number. And the most recent one is they hack into that motor carrier's email address and they can legitimately act as them into the shipper, the receiver, or the broker, all via email.
Wow.
It's pretty impressive. It's impressive what they've identified and how they're doing it. The real scary part is it's technology for sure, but it's also understanding all the steps along the way that make it more difficult for us to continue to try to stay out in front of. So that's their most recent one. And if that doesn't make sense, if you think about how a load picks up, there's a communication from the shipper. Sometimes that's the customer of the logistics company or the receiver, but there's a communication with order information. Um, as a logistics company, you arrange that with a third party motor carrier, and you've established a way of vetting that carrier to know that this is who I should be working with. They're reliable. Their safety scores are good. All the things that we've used in the past to ensure that this is a good carrier. Um, so you wouldn't engage with a bad carrier.
Right.
Unfortunately, though, when they get in and they've hacked into that carrier's, whether it's a system, their TMS, or their email, now it's really difficult to identify that you're not speaking to the actual carrier. So they take that load information and then go into the shipper with that information, act as that carrier, take the load, and then it's gone. And that's where the ghost, if you will, that load's gone, and now they're taking it somewhere else.
Well, and that takes cybersecurity to a whole another level, right? Because we are training our teams on how to look out for an email that might have a fraudulent link. But how do you teach your teams to look out for that happening? Because your teams might actually not know that is actually happening until it's too late.
Sure. So the it's it just continues to get better. And a few years ago, when they realized that they could act as a motor carrier, they would change an email address, and they would change an L in the email address of the carrier to just the number one, and it would
Right.
look like the correct email address. So our team members would communicate them and not know any differently. So we stepped up our game, and we implemented a process that sits inside of a tech tool that sits inside of our email system and recognizes that that email address is not associated with that MC that's registered on the FMCSA or registered with the FMCSA.
Right.
And so that was our first line of defense, and that worked. That worked really well until they were hacking into the legitimate emails.
Right.
And so now that's the next iteration of how do we protect that pickup data and pickup information. So it just continues to evolve.
Absolutely. And we had our first fire emoji. We've got David, who's loving the conversation, and Mitch gave us one as well. And I want to give a shout out over to Amrit on my personal LinkedIn, who's tuning in from Toronto as well. So let's talk about what the losses actually currently look like for businesses. Can you paint us a picture, or is there even an average value per theft, or maybe an average of how many thefts a business might experience? Because again, when we talk about cybersecurity, it's not a matter of if, it's kind of a matter of when now. Right. And it feels like it's the same thing for this as well. So what is this all adding up to for, businesses and your customers?
Sure. I think you mentioned the term $1 billion on the annual, and
yep.
I think that's pretty accurate. Another vendor of ours just spoke to us and was speaking around 500 million thus far this year, and
wow.
for who they engage with. And so, and that's just on the cargo side. So when we think about the value of the cargo, and it can get decently complex when we're talking claims dollars, claims value. Is it the value of it from a retail perspective? Is it the value of it from a wholesale perspective? So I think that $1 billion is easily reachable. We're probably well past that, just from a pure cargo value standpoint. But I think that there's something that's even more interesting, that when we start to talk about what's getting stolen, what's the intrinsic value? What's the value of the reputation of that brand that product has been stolen from? For some, that's the majority of the value. I won't speak too poorly of some customers or but when I think about some of the stuff my wife buys, I'm like, I don't know that that's actually worth what you're paying for it. It's probably just the brand on it, right? But in all seriousness, there's a huge value to that. Even to, like, if something gets stolen, where there's a value around the launch. So we think of some of these larger sneaker manufacturers, where they put so many marketing dollars towards this new sneaker that's going to hit the market. It's going to hit the market this date. If that doesn't happen, what's that value? So it's not just the cargo of the sneaker, it's also the marketing expenses and the brand reputation there too, if they can't do that launch because one of their retail vendors doesn't have the product.
Yeah. So it's not just capital dollars that we're talking about. It's also risk dollars that we're talking about, because that's all reputational risk, marketing risk. Yeah, I think that kind of covers it. But yeah, like we're talking in dollars of $1 billion from a capital cost perspective, potentially. But then we also have to take a look at the other risk dollars that it impacts as well.
That's right.
So, what are some of the other business impacts? I know we just talked about reputational risk. We talked about some of the marketing dollars going into it, but I also think about customer experience, right? But I'm sure there are a lot of other impacts as well. Talk to us about what else a company can feel when something like this happens.
Well, I think from my perspective and what we feel is it's a tarnished reputation because our customers are trusting us that their freight's going to deliver
Right.
intact in the same way. So there's a huge
Hmm.
reputation piece that is tarnished, and the other is the disruption within the entire supply chain. If a load goes missing, sure, the product is missing, that's problematic. Um, but all along the way, that supply chain is now having to change what their regular routine or their pattern or their process. And, in some cases, it's the product not arriving to the assembly line to be, met with the remainder of those pieces. So that entire assembly line has to stop. And so we're very sensitive to that. And one of the things that we do is we try to identify that with our customer. Is this a finished good? Is this a product that's going to go into an assembly line? If so, we take it off our proverbial assembly line and try to handle that differently so that we don't have those disruptions in their supply chain. So it's definitely the money. There's definitely the cost component to it, but it's the disruptions all along the way uh,
Hmm.
that people sometimes don't think about.
Well, and the time to replace that product,
That's right.
right?
Some of
Depending
this
on what
stuff
that
is
is.
where it's coming from. That's absolutely right, and how it was manufactured or created. It definitely it's beyond just the value that we place on it from a monetary standpoint.
Absolutely. Well, we've got some questions over on my personal LinkedIn. Kalinci and Cornelius, we will get to those questions a little bit later, and welcome to joining us in the audience. All right. So, to tackle this huge problem, businesses really need a sort of a melting pot of solutions because there's no one silver bullet for all of the different tactics and approaches at play here. So, talk to us about the types of AI powered tools that are available and how can they be used to prevent theft? And yes, we are talking about AI. Everybody's talking about AI. So I'm interested to see how AI is playing a role.
Well, it's playing a pretty hefty role. I'll talk about it from two ways. There's on the side where before the theft happens, and then there's actually some new tools out there that's helping us after the theft happens for us to try to recover. So on the pre side, I mentioned early on that we do a lot of our carrier vetting process is pretty extensive, and we're leveraging AI to understand who it is we're working with. So it's consuming data, but also then leveraging AI to tell us what's going on with that data. So it's in the past we would try to use a human. It's too much information that we're consuming now. And what I mean is, from a simplest standpoint, does this even make sense for this motor carrier to want this load? And that's a simple question, but
Uh-huh.
based on what we've seen that carrier do internally in our network for us, if they're moving a load from Dallas, if we typically see them in the southeast, and the furthest they stretch out is maybe out to the southwest, but then they want a load that's coming from the northeast going to the west coast. Does that make sense? And so leveraging AI to consume and really aggregate our information and tell us that doesn't make sense. And then pulling in that information too from third-party vendors as well, and then spinning it into that equation too. So we're leveraging some tech there on that side. Um, we are a Salesforce shop. We're pretty proud of it. We actually use Salesforce as our CRM, not for just for customers, but also for carriers. So that relationship, we're spending a lot of energy and time and even money at creating digital relationships, if you will, with our carriers. Again, better understanding them. A lot of that is in the effort of driving efficiencies into their network, but for
Right.
sure along the way, also driving security into ours. Um, there's a really cool tech out there right now that helps us on the backside if equipment gets stolen, or if a load gets stolen that's on our third party carrier. And what they've done is they've leveraged computer imagery to, in my opinion, at this point, the maximum. They've placed computers all over, or not computers, cameras all over the major corridors throughout the United States, at locations where they think they're going to get the most information.
Huh.
And we're now able, through those cameras, they're taking snapshots of commercial vehicles, obviously not pedestrians or pedestrian vehicles, but commercial vehicles. with those snapshots, they're able to get MC numbers, DOT numbers, truck numbers, trailer numbers, tag numbers, a lot of information. And when one of these loads comes up missing, we're able to go to that database, put in the information that we know, whether we grabbed it from the shipper and gained it from their surveillance, their security, and we do this right away. And then we can start to track those pieces of
Yeah.
equipment to try to find it. And it's been successful, extremely successful. We've actually been able to locate and send authorities to go and stop these trucks while they're in motion, because we followed them where they're going. And it's a win for the good guys, if you will, and it feels really good when we're able to do that. But it just speaks volumes to how we're trying to stay ahead of, and I say we, the industry, not just Werner, but the whole industry is trying to stay ahead of these thieves and try to catch them in the act so that we can put them where they belong.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And your first point about does this load make sense? I was actually talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was, just over the last couple of days about that specific thing, right? No longer do we always have to say yes to say yes. We can now decide as a customer or a driver or a carrier as to whether it makes sense for us. And I think that's just going to make it more of a collaborative community and a collaborative industry. And also help us, reduce emissions and all that kind of stuff. I know we talked about sustainability, and that's something that's important to Werner. So, yeah, I think that's super interesting. So you talked a little bit about how AI powered tools are working. You talked about some of those cameras. Does technology play any more of a role in tracking, validation, alerts, and other critical areas other than those cameras? Is there anything else around technology that we wanted to mention here?
For sure. I want to make this comment too. I just thought about it as you said that a lot of our technology we started using for something else and then realized this technology actually could help us here. And I'm sure there's a part of this show for recommendations, but I would highly recommend that as I'm talking through this, that if you have a tech stack, the first thing to do is jump back into that tech stack and just, is there anything that today we have that we could be using to safeguard us against theft? So great point. But to really answer your question, absolutely. We've in my opinion, I think adopted the best in class for tracking. And I'll mention a few names here. I think most people have heard of MacroPoint. They've heard of Trucker Tools, and we leverage Highway to help us with other things too. But ELD integration is a big one. And what I like about what's happening is that carriers are now more willing to do some of this stuff with us, because as I mentioned earlier, it's not us, it's all of us working together. In the past, that some of those things we wouldn't have been able to get a carrier willing to share their information with us. So really leveraging ELD integrations right into our TMS platform to help us track along the way, so that we know exactly where that truck's at, when they got there, all the data that we need to know that truck is moving along the route appropriately. But also using that as well to prevent and safeguard against giving information when we shouldn't. So if the truck is tracking and it's tracking on time in the right location, and that, again, going back to that makes sense, that's when we're going to relinquish pickup information. And we're going to do that again in a way that's safeguarded through multi-factor authenticating that they are who they are too. So, but leveraging that tracking technology, not just a matter of going back to, we used to look at it, are they going to be on time? Now it's, is that who I think I'm working with based on their geographical location, and are they the right truck to give that load to based on where they are in the current place?
But also the right people delivering, the cargo as well, and where it's moving, and all sorts of things that we can do. And also, we talked a lot about your technology on an episode of the Let's Talk Supply Chain podcast with your CTO. It was fascinating. So if anybody wants to go and check that out, because there's so many different things that you're doing. Now, AI and advanced technology are really important, but do they need to work alongside people? I mean, I think we know the answer to that, but how should businesses be thinking about educating teams and empowering them with these types of technologies?
Yeah, you said that we're going to talk AI today, kind of in that same light that most people think, oh, not AI again. And I think AI gets a pretty bad rap in most cases because folks associate it to replacing people's jobs, and that's really not the right way to look at it. I think we
Mhm.
need to look at it the same way we looked at the internet when it came across, years ago. For those that remember that. And that's just enhancing. How can we enhance what the people are doing today and help them all along the way? So really understanding your team's process and what they do, at the desk level, that's where it all starts. And then again, going back to the tech that you have, leveraging AI to help them call out and catch things that maybe they don't have time to get to, or they don't have the visibility to, but allowing that to enhance what they're doing, I think is the best way I can say it. And it still goes back to, though, your process. I mean,
Mhm.
like I said, the basic question, does this even make sense? And so when you build your AI into it, that needs to be the question all along the way, is helping it, uh, using the AI to help you answer that question,
Mhm.
and solve that problem. I would think that a lot of folks on the when they think of adding AI to their tech stack, it's, wow, this is really cool, this is really shiny, and they lose focus on what the problem is they're actually trying to solve, and they quit listening to their people and their team and understanding their battles every single day. So if you're understanding what their problems are at the desk level and who are actually making it all work, and helping them solve their problem with AI, you're going to be successful.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, what do we not like to do? I mean, I kind of like to think
That's right
about it
too.
that way. We're looking at processes and
Yeah,
what everybody's doing on a daily basis, and we all know what we like to do, but we also know what we don't like to do. And so, how can it help me eliminate some of that?
absolutely.
Now, the transportation industry, no, it's a big network. There are a lot of different stakeholders involved, like you've been mentioning throughout this discussion. Businesses are increasingly growing the number of partners they're working with as part of diversification strategies. And I think that's more around resilience. But that also presents a lot of risk. This is another risk factor that we didn't really mention before for cargo theft, right? Can you talk to us about the risk? Um, and not necessarily knowing exactly who you're working with. Um, yeah, talk to us about that.
Sure. So again, I'll answer it from my vantage point and my seat and what I'm responsible for. But when I think of who, I don't know who I'm working for. I guess I'll answer it both ways, actually. I'm going to speak to it from my team first, and are we working with a carrier that we should be working with, and do we know who they are? And I'll go back to that profile, if you will, that we build inside of Salesforce and our CRM, of what that carrier has done for us in the past, what they've told us they like to do. That's one component, but you've also got to rely on all the data points that you're going to get from your vendors. And I mentioned Highway; they do a good job for us with us, and identifying that carrier, this is their history, this is what they've done, this is what they look like in the industry. In most cases, they are ELD integrated, so we can see what that carrier is doing for us, or doing out there, and understand it. And again, it's just about, making sure that we've got some decent visibility there. And we also do some non-technology things, like we had carrier connections last week, where we invite some of our largest carriers in, and I say largest, not maybe in size, but largest in terms of the relationship with us, and we collaborate and talk. And again, that's just another step for us to just continue to move forward and better understanding our partners. And then I think, if I were a customer, if I were a shipper, I'd want to understand who is managing my freight, and I would want to have some questions to help better understand how it is they handle that freight and their process. And the good shippers do. The good shippers collaborate as well. There's a lot of them collaborating right now with us on this exact topic, where how can we work together and make sure that, uh, if somebody were to come in here and take a load that you didn't give it to, how would we be able to help you identify that? So, I think it's important that the communication has to continue to stay heightened. You have to talk, and you don't, just like this, like right away said we've been vulnerable. We've had loads that have gone missing, um, but we learn from those things, and so that's why it's important to continue to, like I said, communicate and work together and have the right questions to understand what it is they do and how they do it.
Yeah, feedback loop or even collaboration is the future of business. I have it behind me. I've been saying it for years. I think people are probably tired of me saying it, but I'm going to continue to say it because I think it's super important and goes along with exactly what you're saying. We've got some great questions here on my personal LinkedIn. I want to encourage everybody in the audience, if you have a question, now's the time to put it in the comments as we get through this conversation. We're going to be hitting up those questions in just a little bit, probably about 15 minutes from now. What do you think are the tools that businesses can leverage to help build profiles, validate third-party profiles, and make sure they're in, a good spot?
Yeah, sure. I mentioned the first one really, and that's a good carrier qualification vendor. I've been fortunate enough to use quite a few of them. I dropped the one's name quite a few times now already, so I think that that's the first step if you're in the logistics space and you're hiring third-party motor carriers that you arrange for to help move. So that's the main is have that in your tech stack to help you with insights. And there's a going back to the communication piece, they're going to tell you what they know based on what other people are feeding them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so along those tools, most of them also will validate insurance, they'll validate their authority, and they'll
Right.
keep you connected. And I think that's critical too. It's one thing to validate it up front, but you've got to stay connected, and you've got to ingest that information every single day so that you know that they're still in good standing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one component to it. And then I do recommend whether you use some form of a CRM inside your TMS platform, is trying to build out those profiles of those carriers that you're using. And it goes beyond now how many trucks do they have. Of course, that's important, but where do they like to go? What do they like to do? What and encourage them to your team to have in-depth questions. So I think having a good TMS and CRM that's working together to help you take that information. And then, the last one I'd say that from a safeguarding is some way to make sure that when you're sending out that load information that you are safe, that who's getting it and who's getting it in their hands to be able to go in there and pick up at your shipper is the right person. And so having a validation tool for that, whether it's multi-factor, some form of multi-factor authentication process, I think is critical as well to make sure that the information gets to where it needs to go safely and secure.
Yeah, and you sort of got me thinking about, what does their routine look like? Where are they stopping? Right? Because I think that's really important as well. Um, because there's secure yards and then there's not secure yards. And so what does that driver routine look like? Where are they stopping? What do they think about when they're stopping as well? Are they thinking about security? Are they thinking about where they're going to be? But also, you don't want to be caught off guard. And so I think your what you mentioned around insurance. Do they have insurance? Right? I mean, hopefully they do, but
Right.
you also want to make sure that you're not working with somebody who doesn't have everything in place so that when it does happen, you're not caught off guard.
Yeah, that's for sure. And what you just spoke to as well. I mean, straight theft is not gone. It still
Right.
happens every single day too. And so again, understanding those routes, when we think about it on our asset side, again, it goes back to I mentioned, do we take this type of a load off of our traditional process and secure it differently because it's high risk, high value.
Right.
And so it's coaching and guiding and trying to help say, hey, this is where we need to go. This is the route we should be taking. Of course, always with safety in mind, safety on the forefront. That's more important than a load being stolen, in my opinion. And well, I think that's the truth. So, but it's also like you said, how do we pattern park? What types of seals are we using? There's a lot of different things, and there's tech out there for that too, as well. That's continuing to develop where it's not just about the old bolt on the back door. There's internal stuff that's uses Bluetooth technology when they get to where they're going to unlock the trailer. There's internal cameras inside the trailers or inside the container on intermodal containers. And so it's all of those things, you're right, that just along the way you keep stacking up, just to piece together a nice, safe, secure supply chain.
You said pattern park. I've never heard that before.
So all of my time wasn't in the brokerage space. I was a terminal manager in the LTL world before. And so pattern parking is where you park the trailers in a position and with the conjunction of tractors to where they can't be moved. You have,
Oh.
it's just it's like a game of Tetris. If I put two loaded trailers back to back, they can't open the doors and get into them. So it's literally as simple as that, or it's uh, parking tractors and trailers in front of a gate so that it's not easy just to get into the gate and take a load out. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
And who said supply chain logistics wasn't fun? I mean, who doesn't like to play a game of Tetris?
well,
Just saying.
if you're the weekend yard jockey responsible for getting the yard set up for Monday, they probably don't like playing Tetris.
Oh, that's so funny. Is there a like talk to us about a high risk versus a low risk profile? Are there like any red flags or anything that you can look out for when you're doing this evaluation that you sort of go, oh, definitely don't want to work with that, or oh, I
There's
really want to work with them.
there's some things I'll probably not say, but no,
Oh, come on. We're just
uh,
friends here. There's not too many people watching.
we definitely look at IP addresses, and so that's where we start to try to identify where third party carriers, if they're associated somehow through an IP address, through a phone number, that's a red flag with a carrier that's been flagged already. You know, where that IP address is coming from as well. We have to be very careful. If you look at all the different countries, like again, going back to why would this IP address be coming in from this foreign country, that it just doesn't, that again, it doesn't make sense. So for sure,
Mhm.
we look at those types of red flags. There's other red flags too, that going back to MCs being associated or trucking companies being associated, where there's a buy and sell that we see happen, and we don't know why that transaction took place. We look for that. We look for, and the reason we look for that is that was an old way of getting into that carrier's network, if you will, is just to go out and buy it, and there's a market for that, and you can buy that MC. And so they've since kind of moved on away from that. But sure, we look for that. We look for rapid growth too. Sometimes that doesn't make sense. If a carrier grows really, really fast, um, how did they grow so fast? Especially in this market that's been constrained. So there's a few indicators for sure that we look for that we, despite all the things that would say they're okay, we're going to raise a red flag and at least ask some further questions.
Yeah, I appreciate you for sharing that because I think, evaluation is one thing, but making sure that we know what we're looking for when we're doing the evaluation, I think is everything. So, businesses are looking to simplify some of their complex tech stacks. And I've talked about this on the show a few times because people and organizations have sort of found themselves with these complex tech stacks. They're also seeking out more impactful solutions for the long term, right? The conversation around scalability has really ramped up. It's also around, all of this technology is coming at us fast enough. How do we keep up? How do we know what's the right way to go? So, talk to us about why it's so important that businesses build a scalable security model.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I'll tackle the tech stack piece first, because I think that's what makes any of your processes or your technology not scalable, is when you get so fragmented that the tech isn't talking to each other. So I think compatibility amongst tech is your number one issue you've got to attack. And if you don't have compatibility, then you'll never get it working together, and you can't
Right.
leverage the other components. So the compatibility piece is huge. But I'd also just focus on your vendors that you believe in, that you have the best relationships with. And as I mentioned earlier, at, even if they don't have the if they're not outwardly selling the ability to solution for the problem that you have, ask them. Like that's got to be your first way of attack. And then, you know, we have a product team here at Warner. Their number one job is to fully understand the products, and that goes back to asking the questions of our vendors. And that product team, that's all they do, is they get up every single day, they engage with the business team, and what do you need, how can we work together, what can we piece together for you, oh, that problem I think we're solving over here, and then putting it together. And you know, but all along the way, from a scalability standpoint, it's really important too, just as I mentioned earlier, don't lose sight of the issue. Like that's what you're
Mhm.
really trying to solve for, and don't make it too complex. The more complex we make it, we lose the scalability. And if you keep it consistent, um, but very process oriented, and I love the word intuitive. If we
Mhm.
think that this should happen, then it probably should, and
Yeah.
that will allow you to continue to evolve and scale with your customers. And then that's the, I would say, the other component is meeting your customers, and in our case, meeting our carriers and our drivers where they want to be. And I think that's part of being intuitive, the intuitive process too, is if you don't know where they're trying to meet, you know, what they're trying to do, and you're not meeting them there with your tech stack, you're going to be left behind, and your stack's not going to be worth anything. But also, you're not going to be able to evolve along the way to continue doing business and grow with them too. So I think that's another piece of it that's just so valuable.
I want to go back to the red flag piece because Alyssa just put in a question, and it's very timely to what we were talking about around the evaluation and the red flags. So, technology can't do it alone. How can carriers and shippers better train and empower teams to spot red flags and act quickly?
I think it goes back to giving them technology that shows them things that maybe they've never even seen before, but then the training component. So um, the why is that important? If we see an IP address associated over here with something, why is that important? This guy's telling me everything's fantastic. No, I'm doing this because of that. it's
Right.
it's digging into those situations, training your team, and then arming them with the confidence and the conviction to stand their ground and say, no, this is what we're going to do. But I think having that information in one place for them to go find, if I'm thinking about speed and being able to react quickly, that's a key component. And then also allowing reporting to look at that and monitor it as well. So when we see those insights, when we see those issues pop up, bring it to the top, and then jump right out there again. You've got trained people because you did the training component. They understand why they're seeing that red flag, and now we engage and we react. And if you do that, you're going to put the customer's best interest first. And when we see problems, like a lot of folks would be scared to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, or whatever we want to say, customer ABC, I don't, you know, maybe I'm a little embarrassed to tell you this, but here's what's going on. Here's what we're doing. Here's how we're handling it. And I think that's another a piece of just going back to the training side is don't be afraid to speak up, stand up when you see that stuff coming. Hope that answered
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah, no, I think it was a great question and a good answer as well. And I think it comes down to trust, right? You really need to establish that trust, whether it's through technology or your customer experience and that kind of thing. And that's how trust is formed,
Yep.
is when you are providing that kind of vulnerability and that information to the customer to say, hey, we might not have got it right today, but we're working towards making it right tomorrow. And I think the follow up question to that, going back to what we were talking about around scalable security models, how can businesses then integrate these security solutions into everyday operations? So we've talked about how people can take a look at those red flags, but how do we integrate it then, like these security solutions? So it's kind of like not just a part of everyday operations, but kind of the everyday mindset.
Well, I mean, that goes back to having a solid, um, robust TMS platform. If you're a logistics provider like us, so we have Mastery. We've partnered with them. they've done a great job thus far building out a product, I think, from a brokerage standpoint that helps us uh, foundationally to continue to grow. So that's bringing all that information into one place, I think would be the way I would answer that. Because it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to do this on this situation, we're going to do that on that situation, and this, and then everybody's swivel chairing all over the office, and we don't have a place where we have, going to use your word, truth, a source of truth. I think that's the critical part, is it has to live somewhere, and it needs to be an ecosystem that works together, but there's got to be a solid source of truth for them to rely on, I think, is, the way I look at that.
Yeah. Well, and also, how do we keep it top of mind? Like, how do we make it culturally something that everybody's thinking about on a day to day basis so nothing does fall through the cracks? Because technology is one thing, but you've also got the human component of the everyday operations and what they're doing and how they're thinking about it and who they're talking to and how they're getting emails and things like that as well. Now, I want to go back to my comment around collaboration, because I think some of this can really feel overwhelming for a lot of organizations, and they need to find ways to navigate through all of this. And I said it earlier, collaboration is the future of business. I think it's really critical in scenarios like this, whether it's internal or external. What level of collaboration do you see between like multiple agencies and businesses? How are we doing a good job at it? Can we do better? And how are we sort of thinking about sharing data and sharing visibility to enhance that collaboration? Because some people are still really hesitant about sharing data.
I think the hesitancy is going away pretty
Okay.
quick here as this becomes as monumental, if you will, and as big of a problem out there in the industry. I think people are much more willing right now to talk. I'll go back to a few years ago when you had a theft happen. Most considered it a cargo claim, and it was very rarely even reported as theft. There was an embarrassing component to it. Nobody wanted to talk about it. We'll just eat the claim. We'll move on. And until it became the scale that it is today, where it's now, as we talked about, all the reasons, it's disrupting supply chains, it's causing marketing issues, it's causing more problems than just a simple cargo claim. And now it's opened people up to, let's work together, and that's the shipper community, the carrier community, logistics, all in between, and everybody's focused on the technology side of it to try to help us blend all of that together. But I think that people have lost their desire to hold things close to their vest. We're all frustrated. And we're willing to share information more than we ever have, even if it's this type of conversation.
Right.
I don't want to safeguard some of the best practices I have in place, because if we all work together, we'll shut this problem down. If anybody can learn something from me, or from, if I can learn something from somebody else, and it prevents another theft, it makes it that much harder for the thieves to get a hold of the freight, then that's a win for the industry and a win for me long term, and our company long term. So I think that there's a willingness now that is allowing for that. And I think that a lot of the technology we're seeing now come out to help us is really doing that. I talked about the cameras in the past, like taking pictures of vehicles driving up and down the road. Most people would have had problems with.
Right.
And I think even us, well, yeah, why are you taking pictures of our trucks, or why are you taking pictures? But there's a realization that now that that's a component to safety, and it's also national security. I speak at a few different types of events and about this problem, and often there's me up there representing the surface transportation component of it, and then there's a federal agent, and then there's somebody representing national security. And you don't think about it, but if if they can infiltrate that part of our network, that's a problem for our entire nation.
Hmm.
And so that's why now there's a lot more heightened awareness around it. So it, more than ever, we've been able to partner with these agencies to help us. Warner being the size and scope, and nearly 70 years in business that we are, we've got a pretty good voice, and we're trying to speak for on the behalf of the industry when we talk openly with these agencies to help us. And there's been a lot of recent changes. You've probably seen them all over the news, just
Right.
as recently as this week of stuff that's happening. And and I think that that's a positive for us. But sadly, I don't think it would have gotten to that place had some of this not caught so much attention, because it's affecting so many businesses now,
Yeah.
just beyond the brokers or the trucking companies.
Yeah, it's so true. I want to acknowledge and appreciate that, because I think that true collaboration is going to start with the organizations within the industries who are willing to share the data and the best practices. And we're using these cameras. Why aren't you? And you've said it publicly today. And I think it's really important that everybody knows what resources are out there, so that, like you said, it's a win win, 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 win scenario, but it affects so many people. It affects people, professionals, supply chain teams, organizations across the industry. Now, I have kind of a similar question from two of our audience members. Cornelius, over on my personal LinkedIn, I think he's also a huge football fan too. So he gives a shout out about that. But they say, how can smaller logistics providers or startups adopt these technologies affordably? But then also, Alyssa said, when you talk about a scalable cargo security model, what does that look like in practice for mid-sized shippers? So I'm asking those kind of together, which makes a bit of a long-winded question, but I think they go hand in hand.
No, I think they do go hand in hand, because sure, Warner, I mentioned, we're a decent sized organization, to put it, I guess lightly. And so if I'm a smaller organization, I might say, well, I'm not Warner, I guess is the way I put that. But the reality is we're battling the same exact uh, things that any brokerage or any logistics company out there is battling. And so the first thing I look at is, if I've been vulnerable and if I've had an event, or if I hear of an event, where in my process today do I have a gap? And that could be a process that you just have in your regular, routine of doing business, not technology enabled at all, or could be technology enabled. And a good example is, let's talk about their spoofing phone calls.
Oof.
There's technology that will capture that.
Mm-hmm.
I can use technology today that will unmask that phone number that they've been able to mask and replicate, that's registered with the FMCSA, that historically I would think I'm speaking to the carrier based on this phone number sitting on my caller ID. So there's unmasking technology that I can use, or I can kindly put that carrier on hold and then just pick up another phone and call them, call that same number back. So I don't think you have to so heavily always rely on technology when you can afford it. And when I say afford it, when it makes you efficient enough to offset the cost, do
Right.
it. Absolutely do it. And if it makes you better, do it. Until then, I think it really goes back to, if this were to happen to us, how would we have caught it in our process? And if you don't have a solution for it, can I solution for it with the current tech stack or the people that I have in place? And if I can't, then maybe I do have to go buy it. But I think that in most cases, you can start to figure out ways, any size business that you are, to either fix it with your process at the people level, or enhance that process with technology. So um,
I think that's a great example, just to showcase how you can do it without necessarily the technology. And I think it's the communication and the conversations that we're having within the industry about what's working for you, but then also what can work for me, and talking to people who have been through that, to see what kind of insight like this that they can give you, like Jordan just gave us today. Now, I'm going to go to one more question, because I have another question for you before we go, and I want to finish at the top of the hour. Amber did ask, what are the best tools to utilize to proactively see the red flags? But I'm going to tag you in that afterwards to answer that one, because we've said a few things throughout the show. So I'm going to go to Shane. What measures are customer shippers currently implementing to support fraud prevention? Have they been open to adapting or refining their processes to enhance security?
yeah, great question. So from a great guy as well. So
Shout out to
shout out
Shane.
shout out to Shane for that one. Shane knows this all too well. So yeah, the collaboration has been historically, it was really all on the broker to ensure that the right truck, the right driver, or when I say broker, logistics company, carrier, whoever is going to the shipper. So the shipper had, um, I would say, limited, you know, exposure in that event, because there was a trust that if they have the pickup number and they got it from them, then this must be the right truck. Going back to the sophistication, they're getting into a logistics company, a shipper, they're getting into somebody's system, figuring out the pickup information, and then they're sending in a piece of equipment that doesn't match what the logistics company has. And what I mean by match, it doesn't have the right truck number. It's not the right carrier. It's not even the right MC that should be there to pick it up. The driver name doesn't match. The trailer number doesn't match. So some of the things that the shippers have implemented, and I think it's fantastic, is helping validate that driver, that truck, that carrier that's supposed to be there based on who the logistics company arranged to pick that order up is actually there. So they've taken a step in the right direction and really validating that, helping us along the way. And then most importantly, when it doesn't match, actually doing something about it and
Yeah.
communicating that back. It's one thing to say, it's supposed to be so and so, but it was actually not them, the different driver. They told me that, I got this load instead, and they're not going to be able to pick it up. That used to be an acceptable answer back before all of this was at the height that it is today. That's not an acceptable answer anymore. So there needs to be a validation step. And the shipper community that we work with has really stepped up and started to help us with that. And I think, again,
Awesome.
that's the communication, collaboration, and everybody working together. And
Mhm.
if you think about how simple that is, there's very limited sophistication technology in that. It's just legitimately, is truck number 123 from carrier ABC with Jim Smith coming across the line there. That's who is supposed to be there. And so but it is pretty neat to watch that collaboration and see those changes the shippers are helping us with.
Awesome. I love that. So one quick question, because I know we've got to wind this down. What's one thing, only one thing you'd like our listeners to go away thinking about or taking action on from the discussion today?
Well, I think anybody listening knows that we got a problem. The one thing I would say is, the minute you feel like you've got it all figured out, that's as cliche as it can get, but it's 100% true. When you think you have all the answers, when you think that you're not vulnerable, whether you're a carrier, a broker, or a shipper, you may think, my freight nobody wants. Probably somebody's going to want it, because it's something they can get rid of. If you think you're a broker and you've got all the answers and no, I don't have any stolen loads, you may not know that you have stolen loads. So you might want to go back and check and validate that none of your loads have been stolen. And if they haven't, somebody's going to try. And then on the carrier side, I would say that when I think about, in my world, that's kind of the flow, is what role do I play in all of this, and how can I help as well? Because at the end of the day, it's going to affect them too, in the long run, and change the landscape and the way that we all do business. So it's us working together. But I would just say, don't think you're in this alone, and definitely don't think that you're not in this as well.
Yeah, I love that. Well, when we talk about the industry being under attack and the types of numbers involved, it really is scary. It's a worrying time for businesses, but they don't need to feel powerless. The insights that you, Jordan, have shared today around AI tools, red flags, collaboration, education are so valuable in helping businesses evaluate their risk and move from a reactive to a proactive approach to tackle that. So if you want to take back control and build strategies for effective, scalable security and theft prevention, check them out at werner.com. A big thank you to Jordan for sharing all your insights today. And I want to give a shout out to all of you who were listening, watching, commenting, giving us some fire emojis today, because we have loved having you here. And if we didn't get to your question, we're going to be tagging the Werner team and you're going to be hearing from them soon. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.